Welcome back to CIA Declassified. We are stepping into the early 1960s, a period where the traditional maps of empire are being torn to shreds. Across Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, new nations are emerging from the wreckage of colonialism. But these aren't stable democracies. They are power vacuums filled by strongmen, tribal elders, and opportunistic warlords. For the agency, the mission was clear. Ensure these new players didn't lean toward Moscow. You couldn't always win them over with ideology, but you could win them over with influence. This was the era of the political paramilitary, where a suitcase of cash or a promise of protection carried more weight than a diplomatic cable. This was the world of KUMUD. How did this operation get its name? The designation KUMUD was a cryptonym assigned within the agency's Central Asian and African divisions. Unlike many modern operations with aggressive names, the term KUMUD actually refers to the white water lily in Sanskrit. The reason for this choice was part of a specific agency naming convention that used botanical terms for nurturing operations, programs designed to grow or cultivate local assets, just as a lily sits on the surface while its roots are deep in the mud. KUMUD represented the clean political face of a leader whose power was rooted in the murky clandestine support of the agency. KUMUD wasn't just about bribery. It was a sophisticated system of interpersonal and regional manipulation. The KUMUD operation was a covert action program designed to identify, vet, and provide support to third force leaders, those who were neither traditionally democratic nor overtly communist. A quote from a declassified 1961 field manual. The objective in KUMUD is not to find the perfect Democrat, but to find the most effective anti-communist who already holds the loyalty of the local population. End quote. Records show that KUMUD utilized technical assistance teams, agency officers who lived with warlords to provide advice on everything from irrigation to guerrilla warfare. Documentation confirms that the agency provided warlords with personal security grants, which were used to hire mercenaries or buy specialized armored vehicles for their families. The program used medical diplomacy, sending agency-affiliated doctors to treat the families of tribal leaders to build deep personal debt. A quote from a declassified internal memo on tribal relations. A chieftain who owes his son's life to an American doctor is a chieftain who will deny the Soviets' use of his valley. End quote. KUMUD involved the gold standard payment system, where local leaders in regions with unstable currency were paid in gold or untraceable precious gems. Logs indicate that the CIA provided communications kits, including high-powered radios that allowed warlords to coordinate with one another, effectively creating a pro-Western shadow network. The agency established shell companies to buy the agricultural exports of certain warlords at inflated prices, providing them with a legal and steady income stream. Technical files reveal the use of aviation logistics support using the agency's proprietary airline, Air America, to move a warlord's troops or supplies under the guise of commercial cargo. Agency handlers utilized status gifts, such as custom engraved ivory-handled revolvers or luxury watches, to create a sense of brotherhood with tribal elites. A quote from a declassified 1963 field log. The chieftain views these items not as bribes, but as tributes to his authority. This distinction is vital for operational security. End quote. KUMUD included education bursaries where the children of Allied warlords were sent to private schools in Switzerland or the UK on the agency's dime to ensure future loyalty. Records prove that the CIA manipulated local commodity prices to punish warlords who flirted and filtered with Soviet agents, effectively starving their local economies until they returned to the fold. Documentation confirms that the agency provided intelligence dossiers to warlords about their own internal rivals, making the leader dependent on the agency for their physical survival. A quote from a declassified 1964 strategy paper. By becoming the primary source of the warlord's internal security information, we ensure a seat at his inner council. End quote. KUMUD operations distributed salt and grain subsidies in drought-stricken areas to ensure that the population associated the agency-backed leader with divine or supernatural provision. Technical memos detail the use of clandestine broadcasting stations hidden in the mountains that played traditional music interspersed with pro-warlord and anti-communist messages. The agency facilitated tribal marriages by providing the necessary dowries, often in the form of livestock or land, to cement alliances between two pro-Western clans. Records indicate the CIA used psychological propaganda leaflets dropped from unmarked planes that depicted Soviet leaders as enemies of the local religion. A quote from a declassified 1962 operational directive. We must speak the language of the valley. If the people value cattle, we'll talk in cattle. If they value gold, we speak in gold. End quote. The agency operated mobile repair units for Soviet-made weaponry that warlords had captured, ensuring they didn't need to go to Moscow for spare parts. Documentation shows that KUMUD funded traditional festivals where agency-backed leaders would distribute gifts, reinforcing their image as generous patriarchs. The CIA utilized cloud seeding technology in specific KUMUD zones to produce rain, convincing local tribes that their leader possessed mystical powers over the weather. Internal ledgers show the use of luxury conduits where high-end European goods were smuggled through the desert to satisfy the personal taste of Allied warlords. A quote from a field officer's declassified report. Warlord X requested a specific vintage wine delivered via courier yesterday. Alignment remains stable. End quote. KUMUD included the creation of private airstrips on warlord-controlled land, allowing for rapid extraction or reinforcement without the central government's knowledge. Records prove the agency sabotaged the diplomatic gifts sent by Soviet emissaries, such as poisoning livestock or breaking machinery to make the USSR look incompetent. The CIA provided counterinsurgency training to a warlord's personal guard using Green Berets acting under agency Title 50 authority. Documentation reveals that KUMUD controlled the water rights in certain arid regions by funding the construction of deep-bore wells exclusively in Allied territory. The agency utilized antique artifact smuggling as a way to allow warlords to move wealth out of their countries into private Western bank accounts. Logs show that KUMUD agents regularly used polygraph tests on a warlord's staff to identify potential KGB moles within the palace. The agency provided warlords with encrypted dead drop kits, allowing for the secure exchange of physical intelligence without direct contact with handlers. Records show that KUMUD funded the creation of paramilitary training camps in neutral third countries to mask the U.S. involvement in a warlord's rise to power. The CIA utilized psychological operations, PSYOPs, teams to record and broadcast a warlord's victories, often inflating the numbers to demoralize communist rivals. Operational files confirm that KUMUD assets were given tactical bicycles and light motorcycles to navigate dense jungle or desert terrain where trucks were too conspicuous. Documentation proves the agency orchestrated currency devaluation in territories held by hostile warlords to trigger internal revolts. The agency distributed shortwave radio receivers to villagers in KUMUD zones, pre-tuned to agency-operated stations broadcasting news and stability reports. Logs revealed the use of clandestine veterinary programs to treat the camels and horses of nomadic tribes, ensuring their mobility for agency logistics. KUMUD utilized cultural anthropologists as deep cover assets to study tribal law and identify the most effective pressure points for diplomatic coercion. If you look at the KUMUD files today, the largest and most frequent redactions occur in the section titled Section 9, Incentive-Based Neutralization and Direct Subsidy. This file contains the most redactions in the entire declassified history of the operation. Why? Because it deals with the specific price tags placed on human loyalty and the darker side of influence. Now, if you want to get into the really dark stuff, look at those black bars in Section 9. There is a persistent whisper among declassification researchers that these redactions hide a literal bounty list. The speculation is that the agency didn't just pay warlords for friendship, they paid performance bonuses for the elimination of specific communist agitators. We're talking about a menu of prices for targeted neutralizations, a direct and very illegal contract, killing program hidden under the guise of a regional support. And then there's the money. In the Golden Triangle, many former KUMUD-linked leaders magically became some of the biggest drug lords on the planet. The conspiracy theory here is that the agency didn't pay them in cash. They paid them in permission. Theorists speculate the redactions hide an opium offset policy. The agency facilitated the transport of narcotics by their warlord allies in exchange for military cooperation. They say the blacked out logs are actually the ledgers for the agency's protection fees. Perhaps the most cynical theory is the chaos engine. Some speculate the redacted files detail how the agency provided weapons and gold to two rival warlords at the exact same time. Why? To keep them both so busy fighting a bloody localized civil war that neither one could ever grow strong enough to challenge the US-backed central government. It's the divide and rule strategy taken to a sociopathic extreme, and some believe the redactions hide the mouth match calculations for these manufactured wars. A more outlandish speculation has recently surfaced regarding the medical diplomacy files. This conspiracy theory suggests that the agency didn't just treat illnesses, they used the medical visits to collect DNA samples from tribal lineages. The theory posits that the redactions hide a project to map hereditary power vulnerabilities, seeking to understand if certain families were genetically predisposed to specific traits or if their bloodlines could be managed through multi-generational selective breeding programs sponsored by the agency. Was the KUMUD operation a success? Tactically, it was a short-term masterpiece. It successfully prevented several strategic regions from falling under Soviet influence during the critical decolonization window. Strategically, it was one of the CIA's double-edged swords. The program was a success in that it built a wall against communism, but it failed in terms of long-term stability. Many of the leaders supported under KUMUD became the brutal dictators of the 1970s and 80s. The success of KUMUD is seen in the survival of pro-Western corridors in unstable regions. However, the program created a dependency cycle where local leaders became more accountable to Langley than to their own people. It was a categorical success in achieving immediate Cold War objectives, but it left a legacy of blowback that would haunt foreign policy for decades. The agency successfully managed to buy time, but they could not buy peace. By 1975, the KUMUD model of warlord management was integrated into every major paramilitary manual as the definitive way to handle irregular warfare. The operation was so successful in its methodology that it became the gold standard for managing proxy forces in Afghanistan, and Central America. Its ultimate success lay in its ability to operate without a footprint, ensuring that while the warlords took the blame for the violence, the agency took the credit for the stability. This operation effectively proved that in a vacuum of power, the man with the most sophisticated whisper wins the day. It succeeded in making the invisible hand of American influence the ultimate arbitrator of tribal destiny. By the end of the operation, the agency had successfully turned traditional authority into a tool of modern geopolitics. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the warlord's whisper resulted in breakthroughs that define modern irregular warfare, such as human terrain mapping. The method of mapping tribal lineages and rivalries to predict conflict is now the basis for modern military sociology software used in stabilization missions. Micropayment clandestine finance. The gold standard payments evolved into the modern use of cryptocurrencies and digital hawala systems to fund assets and baking black holes. Portable, secure SAT linkages. The bulky radios given to warlords led to the development of man-portable satellite communicators used by NGOs and special forces today. And psychological asset vetting. The tools used to determine if a warlord was ideologically stable are now used in corporate leadership profiling and high-level security clearances. KUMUD reminds us that in the game of nations, morality is often traded for map space. The warlord's whisper was a project that turned tribal leaders into chess pieces and valleys into battlegrounds. The agency proved that while you cannot always win a heart, you can almost always rent a hand. The dust of those old battles has settled, but the power structures the agency built in those valleys often remain, hidden under new names and new banners. We are still hearing the echoes of those whispers in every modern conflict where the local strongman holds the key to the castle. The ghost of these tactical alliances continue to haunt the geopolitics of the 21st century. Every time a new proxy war ignites, the playbook of KUMUD is dusted off and put back into play. The lessons learned and the salt and dust remain the foundation of how the agency manages the unmanageable. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and remember, the man holding the gun is often answering to the man holding the gold. Join us next time as we examine Bond. In the high-altitude air of Mexico City, the world's spies gathered to trade secrets and lies. We'll uncover the facts behind Bond, the designation and cryptonym for the CIA station in Mexico City. It was the ultimate crossroads of the Cold War, where every shadow had a name and every name had a price. Join us next time for The Southern Gateway. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.